Melissa, are you awake? Sienna Riggs's annoying voice pierced through the middle of the night. I couldn't tell if I was dreaming or actually awake. I fumbled around my pillow until I found my phone. When I turned it on and saw the date on the screen, I became certain I had been reborn. Outside my bed curtain, Sienna wasn't giving up when I didn't answer her. Instead, she kept calling my name. However, I simply turned off my phone, put in my earbuds, and closed my eyes. When Sienna still didn't get a response, she pulled my curtain open. It was already past 1 a.m., but another roommate was still up playing video games. The glow of her monitor flashed against my eyelids as the keyboard clacked in the background. Melissa, Melissa, are you asleep? Sienna's voice grew louder. At that point, it was loud enough to wake anyone up. Still, I kept my eyes tightly shut, determined not to move. I knew Sienna's game. I knew I couldn't give in because if I opened my eyes, she would get exactly what she wanted. In my previous life, she loved pulling these little compliance tests. If I so much as opened my eyes and asked what she wanted, she would just grin and say, "Oh, nothing. I just wanted to see if you were sleeping." It had driven me crazy and kept me up all night, while she couldn't have been happier. Not to mention, that wasn't the only bizarre thing she did. When we first moved into the dorm, she'd introduced herself by saying she was from a small rural town and wasn't used to city life, so she might need our help a lot. She acted like a clueless newborn who knew absolutely nothing. Once classes started, the professors posted all the instructions in the group chat so anyone who read the announcements knew what to do, yet Sienna still came to us with the same questions every single time. "Melissa, how do I submit this assignment? I have no idea what to do." I told her to check the group chat since all the instructions were there, but she wouldn't even look and just kept asking, "What format do we need, Word or PDF?" "Either is fine. Just go check the group chat first," I'd said. It was like Sienna had a built-in filter that blocked out everything I said, and she just kept doing her own thing. "Melissa, it still won't go through. Can you help me?" Again, I reminded her to check the announcements. When she finally listened, it was only to ask, "Where are the announcements? How do I find them?" I have no idea. I'd nearly lost my mind from frustration, so I started keeping my guard up around her after that, but people like Sienna always found a way to catch me off guard, no matter how prepared I was. One morning before class, one of my roommates couldn't get out of bed and asked me to sign her in. It seemed harmless enough, but when I got there, I realized I was the only one from our dorm who'd shown up. The other three hadn't arrived. Since it was an easy class and the professor wasn't taking roll, I figured it wouldn't hurt to help them out, so I marked all 4 of us present on the app. I was feeling pleased with myself for doing a good deed when Sienna suddenly burst through the main door. She marched straight up to the professor, held up her phone, and asked, "Professor, why does my phone show I was signed in when I wasn't even here?" Everyone in the classroom turned to stare at her, and I was so shocked that I broke out in a cold sweat. The professor shot her a cold look and said, "You know exactly how your name got checked in." Sienna replied, "I honestly have no idea. That's why I came to ask you. The system must have glitched. I never tapped anything, and it signed me in on its own." She put on her best innocent act and annoyed the professor so much that he actually let out a laugh. However, it didn't take him long to realize I was the one behind it. Because I'd signed in for 3 of my roommates, I ended up failing the course and had to retake it the next semester. Meanwhile, my other 3 roommates just lost a few participation points. I was so mad I could barely breathe. I gritted my teeth and asked Sienna why she had to make a scene, but she pouted like a victim and said, "How was I supposed to know you weren't allowed to sign people in? You're the one who did it." From that moment on, I swore I would never stick my neck out for anyone again and started keeping my distance from Sienna. I thought staying away from her would save me from trouble, but I was still no match for her antics. Later on, the school held a speech contest with prize money for first place and even the chance to apply for a scholarship. I signed up right away and spent days researching and preparing. On the day of the contest, I was on stage delivering my speech with full confidence when Sienna suddenly stood up in the audience and demanded to know why my speech sounded so much like her ideas. The room instantly buzzed with whispers, and my speech was cut short. Everyone's gaze on me had completely changed. Afterward, I pulled Sienna aside and asked how my speech could be anything like hers when she hadn't even joined the competition. She pointed at her head with a straight face and said, "It's crazy, right? I dreamed about it a few days ago, and it was the same as your speech. It freaked me out." I nearly passed out when I heard that. In the end, I'd lost my shot at the scholarship, and rumors soon spread around campus that I was a plagiarist. The stress dragged me back into depression, and one night I ended up on the school rooftop. But maybe fate wasn't done with me yet because I was given another chance at life. This time, I was determined not to put up with Sienna's nonsense anymore. She was going to pay. She kept calling my name, but I ignored her. Then, just as she was about to yell again, our roommate, Jessica Mills, who was in the middle of her game, finally lost her patience. She yanked off her headset and snapped, "Melissa, Melissa, Melissa, what is this? Are you trying to yell my ear off? It's the middle of the night. Can you shut up? I can't even hear my own game." We'd used to have 4 girls in the dorm, but one had moved out because she couldn't stand Sienna. Now, only Jessica and I were left. I'd stayed because I couldn't afford to move, and Jessica had stayed because she wasn't someone Sienna would dare cross. So instead, Sienna focused on me, treating me like an easy target and making my life miserable. Sienna was stunned by Jessica's sharp tone and didn't dare talk back. She muttered, "I just wanted to wake her up and see if she was asleep." "Are you out of your mind? She's asleep, and you're going to wake her up? Do you even hear yourself? Why don't you just lift her eyelids and ask if she's sleeping?" Jessica impatiently shot back. I almost burst out laughing at Jessica's words, but the feeling didn't last. Her words gave Sienna an idea, and she decided to climb up to my bunk to find out for sure if I was awake. Clearly, she wouldn't rest until she woke me up. As soon as I saw Sienna stepping onto the ladder and poking her head through my bed curtains, I balled my fists and swung. "Grrr, monster attack!" My punch landed squarely on her nose. Sienna yelped in pain and clutched her face. Losing her balance, she tumbled straight off the ladder. Even with my headphones on, I could hear the loud thud of her hitting the floor. But still, I kept my eyes shut and pretended to be fast asleep. After falling, Sienna finally dropped the act. She stormed over and shook me awake. "Melissa, why did you hit me?" I couldn't keep playing dead anymore, so I simply rubbed my eyes and blinked in confusion. "Huh? Did I hit you? When?" Sienna clutched her nose. "You punched me in the nose. It hurts like hell. Don't you dare deny it." I looked even more confused. I was asleep. How could I have hit you? And what are you doing climbing into my bed in the middle of the night? Were you trying to... I let the sentence trail off on purpose. Whatever Sienna imagined made her jump back. She protested, "Of course not. I just wanted to see if you were asleep. Who knew you'd attack me?" I nodded seriously. "Next time, don't even think about waking me up. I don't sleep lightly, and this time I only punched you once. Who knows what could happen next time? But I'm a kind person. Since you woke me up just this once, I won't hold it against you." With that, I lay back down. Meanwhile, Sienna sat on the floor, speechless and stunned. Finally, fearing I would throw another punch, she sulked her way back to her bed. That punch kept Sienna in line for a few days. At least she'd stopped waking me in the middle of the night. But I knew she wouldn't stay quiet forever. She would definitely remember it. After all, living in that dorm meant no real peace. The very next day, I went to the counselor, Gary Myers, to request a dorm change, hoping to move out as soon as possible. Given Sienna's level of absurdity, I assumed switching rooms would be simple. But as it turned out, I was overly optimistic. "A dorm change? That's not going to work," Gary said. "Everyone has different personalities, so you need to learn to get along. Sienna hasn't really done anything bad. You're all classmates. Just be patient and talk things out. Besides, all the other dorms are full. Where would you even move to? You're in college now, so act a little more mature. Take my son, for example. He's studying in Varion and sharing an apartment with strangers. At first, he wanted to move out too, but now they all get along fine. If he can do it, why can't you?" I rolled my eyes at Gary's pompous little speech. He clearly relied on his PhD wife and loved bragging about having a highly educated spouse and a child studying abroad. Put nicely, he seemed relaxed and privileged, but put bluntly, he was just showing off. Since changing dorms was out of the question, I sighed and left the office. That evening, I was in the dorm watching a show when someone knocked on the door. Then the class representative walked in with a few sheets of paper. "These are the psychological evaluation forms for this semester," she said. "Just fill them out." The counselor, Mr. Myers, said, "You can answer no to everything, just like we always do." These evaluations happened every semester and were mostly a formality, so we were used to it. Sienna looked at her form and asked, "Why do we have to answer no to everything? Can't we answer honestly?" The class representative casually replied, "Answering no is faster. If you answer yes, you'll have to check each question and see if it actually applies. Even if you really had a problem, the school probably wouldn't do anything. I've heard that in other departments, students flagged for severe depression were just told to take a leave and go home." Sienna nodded thoughtfully and stared at her paper. After the class representative left, I glanced at her and casually said, "It's not that serious. Even if someone has a mental health issue, the school would handle it. The counseling center isn't just for show." With that, Sienna picked up her pen and started filling out the form. There weren't that many questions, so I finished mine in under a minute. Meanwhile, Sienna was still carefully thinking through the third question. The next day, the class representative collected all the forms and handed them over to Gary. A few days later, during class, Gary suddenly knocked on the door. After apologizing to the lecturer, he called Sienna out. Something felt off, so I slipped out the back door to see what was happening. In an empty classroom, Gary threw the evaluation form in front of her. "Who told you to fill this out incorrectly? Didn't the class representative tell you to answer no to everything?" Sienna looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Why do we have to answer no to everything? Can't we answer honestly?" Gary nearly exploded in anger. He couldn't admit that this was mostly a formality because if a student really had a serious mental issue, it would be a major problem. "I told you to answer no to everything. Why are you asking so many questions?" Sienna, completely unaware of his frustration, continued, "But some of these questions do apply to me. Isn't answering no to everything basically lying? The form even says to be truthful." Initially, Gary worried that Sienna might have a serious mental health issue. If she did something drastic, even his PhD wife and their child studying abroad wouldn't be able to save him. Now, however, he was sure that Sienna wasn't mentally ill. She was just a little crazy. "Never mind. Here's a new form. Fill it out again and bring it to my office after class." Sienna simply agreed without another word. Gary thought he could finally breathe, but he was celebrating too soon. After class, Sienna handed in the completed form. Coincidentally, the department secretary, Laura Lane, happened to be there to check on the student's mental health. "Don't worry, Ms. Lane. We've carefully gone through everything," Gary said, putting on a polite front while silently signaling to Sienna to leave. But Sienna didn't get the hint. Instead, she turned to Laura and asked, "Why do we have to answer no to everything on this form? Is that a school rule?" The air seemed to freeze for a few moments. Gary stood there with his mouth wide open, unable to say a word. Laura, however, frowned sharply and shot the counselor a piercing look. "Who allowed you to falsify the data? Mental health issues are serious. How could you be so careless?" Gary hurriedly explained, "No, Ms. Lane, I was just carefully giving instructions. You know how students are these days. They're shy and don't want classmates to know about their mental issues. So some of them randomly fill it out. I can't control that." In Gary's mind, he was already cursing Sienna to death. He'd known a few days ago that this girl was nothing but trouble. "No, I remember the class representative said, it was your instruction for everyone to answer no." "Are you sure you're not mistaken?" Sienna asked, her expression completely sincere and her tone puzzled. She looked utterly unaware of how tense the situation was, and she just kept making it worse. At this point, Laura didn't need any further explanation. With a cold snort, she ordered that all the evaluations be redone. After Laura left, Gary glared at Sienna. "Are you crazy? What are you doing, running into the office and causing trouble like this?" Sienna looked completely innocent. "I was just being honest. Who knew the secretary would get angry? How is that my fault? If not, whose fault is it? Why couldn't you just keep quiet? How did someone like you even get into university? Did you cheat on the entrance exam? Get out of here, I don't want to see you right now." The counselor was furious, but he couldn't even punish Sienna. His anger just sat in his throat, simmering. Because of Sienna's bold honesty, we all had to redo our psychological evaluations. This time, we had to answer truthfully, too. Some students were too lazy to bother and just checked no for everything, and they ended up being called to the office for talks that went on all afternoon. Meanwhile, while Gary couldn't punish Sienna directly, he still had his ways. The students spent the whole day in the office, tense and exhausted. Before finally letting them go, Gary forced a smile and said, "Honestly, I didn't want to bother you with this. If Sienna hadn't told Ms. Lane about this the other day, none of this would have happened. Still, she was only looking out for you, worried about your mental health." Just those few words were enough to make everyone turn against Sienna. Even students from other departments who hadn't known her before started going out of their way to find out who she was. Soon, Sienna became famous. Even in the dining hall, people whispered and pointed, throwing in a few insults when she walked by. When professors assigned group projects, nobody wanted to work with her either. She'd even asked me once, but I declined since I'd already teamed up with Jessica. After class, as Jessica and I were about to head to the cafeteria, Sienna called out, "Melissa, I don't know what I did to offend you. Why won't you let me join your group?" I coldly looked at her. The other classmates were still in the room, and it was obvious she was trying to guilt trip me by putting me on the spot in front of everyone. "Sorry, our group is fine with just the two of us. Go ask another group," I simply said. Sienna looked distressed. "But everyone else is paired with their roommates, and their groups are full. You two only have 2 people. Why not let me join?" As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes. It was as if she'd been terribly wronged. Just then, a guy in the back row stood up and said, "Come on, it's not a big deal. We're all classmates. What's wrong with adding one more person?" "Melissa, you live in the same dorm. Don't be so petty." He was Oscar West. Sienna might have been a little weird, but she was attractive. A few guys had tried to pursue her when she'd first come to campus, and Oscar was one of them. I rolled my eyes, but just as I was about to speak, Jessica cut in and said, "Since we're all classmates, just let Sienna join your group. Our group is full anyway. Adding one more won't hurt, so why make a fuss?" Oscar paused for a moment, and Sienna immediately gave him a pleading look. He had always liked her, and since the whole counseling incident hadn't affected him, he didn't hold it against her and agreed right away. Jessica tugged me out of the classroom, and once we were far enough away, she finally let out a laugh. "I can't believe that idiot is still smiling. Just wait. He'll be crying soon." Sienna was hopeless most of the time, and group projects were no exception. She didn't even know how to switch a computer's language keyboard and had to be taught step by step. Not to mention, if anyone showed a hint of impatience, she would trot out her background, saying she'd grown up in the countryside and wasn't familiar with computers. When asked to do research, she couldn't even handle basic keyboard shortcuts. So we told her not to bother and just be responsible for presenting. However, once she got on stage, she completely froze, stuttering through her lines and leaving us with the lowest grade in the class. Between dragging Sienna along or just splitting the work with Jessica, I would rather do the extra work myself than spend the whole time babysitting her. But since Oscar was so eager, I decided to give him a heads up. I pulled out my phone and bluntly texted him, "Do you like Sienna?" It took him a long while, but he finally replied, "You noticed that too." That left me speechless, but I still typed back, "Here's some advice. Sienna's terrible with computers. She's always been dead weight in group projects. Be careful." His reply came fast. "Seriously? You're really going to ostracize her just because she's not good with computers? I'll just add her name to the project and the problem's solved. I'm not petty like you women." Once he said that, I felt reassured. I grinned, shut off my phone, and went back to work. Sure enough, while Jessica and I sweated over our project, Sienna did nothing. Still, with our division of labor, we wrapped up pretty quickly. The day of the presentation arrived soon after. Each group had to send one representative to the stage, and it was soon Oscar's group's turn. Their first slide listed all the group members' names, including Sienna's. I knew full well she hadn't lifted a finger. Her name was just for decoration. Right after Oscar wrapped up and our lecturer, Gloria Bolton, was about to give feedback, Sienna suddenly stood up from the front row. "Oscar, did you make a mistake? I didn't contribute at all." I bit my lip hard to keep from bursting out laughing. Gloria frowned at her. "What's going on?" Oscar quickly jumped in and said, "No, Miss Bolton. She's part of our group. I asked her to gather research materials." As he spoke, he kept giving Sienna looks. He was practically spelling it out for her, but Sienna was utterly clueless. "What? When did I do research? You must be mistaken, Oscar." "Of course you did. Remember that day after class when you printed out those materials and gave them to me? That was the research." Oscar scrambled to cover for Sienna and even pulled out a couple of pages as proof. But with Sienna, even feeding her the lines didn't work. She said, "That wasn't me. Sorry, Miss Bolton. I didn't participate in this project, so I didn't do anything." That shut Oscar right up. He couldn't spin it anymore. Gloria had seen this kind of behavior before, so she immediately put 2 and 2 together. She flatly said, "0 for your group." Then she moved on to the next presentation. The rest of Oscar's group looked at Sienna differently after that. As soon as class ended and Gloria left the room, they all stood up and snapped at her. "Are you out of your mind? Forget being ungrateful about us adding your name? But what the hell was that nonsense you just pulled?" Sienna didn't think she had done anything wrong. Her brain just worked differently. "I only asked because I saw my name up there. Isn't it wrong for you to lie to the lecturer? I don't see what I did wrong." "What is this, your first day in college? You just dragged our whole group down. Do you even feel a shred of shame?" Sienna's face showed a hint of hurt, but she still doubled down. "You added my name without asking. Can't I at least question it? This is straight up bullying." She had dragged the whole group down and was now trying to play the victim. Upon realizing they couldn't reason with her, the others turned their frustration onto Oscar. "We told you not to put her name in, but you insisted. Now we're stuck with a 0. If I fail this class, who's taking responsibility?" There was a saying that birds of a feather flocked together, and that couldn't have been truer. After Sienna pulled that ridiculous stunt, most people would have been furious, but not Oscar. Instead of being annoyed at her for dragging everyone down, he actually thought she was kind and righteous. "If you had a problem, you should have said something earlier instead of whining after things went south." Sienna didn't do anything wrong. She just didn't want to lie to Ms. Bolton, and that takes courage. Then he added, "Come on, it's not a big deal. As long as you study hard for finals, you won't fail. It sounds to me like you just don't want to put in the effort, and now you're trying to dump the blame on me and Sienna." Upon hearing that outrageous statement, I couldn't even laugh. Everyone else was stunned speechless too. In the end, someone spat in frustration and snapped, "You two are a pair of lunatics. You're seriously messed up." Since Oscar and Sienna had dragged the whole group down, the others went to Gloria to plead their case. Thankfully, Gloria was reasonable and agreed to let them redo the assignment. So that meant the only ones who'd gotten a 0 were Oscar and Sienna, but the two of them couldn't care less about the failing grade anymore. After that incident, it was like the two misfits had found each other. They clicked instantly, and their bond grew closer by the day. One evening, Sienna came back to the dorm beaming, clutching a bouquet of flowers. She proudly announced that she and Oscar were officially dating. I exchanged a glance with Jessica, and we couldn't help but remark how perfectly matched they were. Naturally, Sienna completely missed the sarcasm and happily went back to her desk. Once those two started dating, they became completely shameless. They video called each other in the dorm every single day. In the past, Sienna had constantly asked us the most basic questions, and we'd honestly thought she was unintelligent. Now, Oscar treated her cluelessness like it was adorable. It was as if her stupidity fed his ego. One night, around 9 p.m., I came back from the library and noticed that Sienna still wasn't in the dorm. I figured she was out on another date and probably wouldn't come back at all. Just then, my phone rang, and I saw that it was her. I didn't answer. After all, I knew it couldn't be anything good. After trying to reach me 3 times, Sienna gave up and dialed for Jessica instead. Jessica was in the middle of a game and answered the call without even looking. "It's not my problem if you don't come back. I don't have time for this." She continued. "Don't bother coming back at all then. Just stay somewhere else." After hanging up, she glanced at me and rolled her eyes. She's insane. She actually wanted me to stop the dorm supervisor from locking the door until she gets back. Tell me that's not completely nuts. In our dorm, the rule was that doors had to be locked by 10 p.m., but the dorm supervisor was easygoing. All we had to do was say a few nice words, and she usually wouldn't report it to Gary. But sweet-talking her way through things was something Sienna had never learned. Sure enough, a little after 10 p.m., someone knocked on our door. Then a female student from our class poked her head in and said, "Sienna's locked outside." From the girl's expression, I knew it was worth a look, so I hurried downstairs to catch the show. By then, it was nearly 10:30 p.m. The glass doors were shut tight, and Sienna and Oscar were standing hand in hand outside. "Sorry, ma'am," Oscar said to the dorm supervisor. "I had an upset stomach, and my girlfriend came with me to the hospital. That's why we're late." "Could you let her in?" Sienna blinked at him. "When did you have an upset stomach?" "We just went to the state fair, didn't we?" The dorm supervisor's eyes narrowed. "So what were you two really doing?" Oscar scrambled. "We ate at the fair, but the food wasn't clean. I got sick, so we went to the hospital." That sounded plausible enough. However, just as the dorm supervisor was about to unlock the door, Sienna piped up again and said, "What hospital? We never went. I told you that the barbecue stall would take forever, but you insisted on waiting. Now look, we're locked out." The dorm supervisor froze, her hand still on the lock. "If you went to the hospital, show me the receipt. Otherwise, you're not coming in." With that, she sat down on a chair off to the side and refused to look at them again. Oscar pulled Sienna aside and muttered, "Why did you butt in while I was talking? Where are we supposed to find a place to stay now, and where are you even sleeping tonight?" Sienna retorted, "How was I supposed to know you were lying? We really didn't go to the hospital." After a moment of thought, Oscar sighed and said, "Forget it. Since you can't get in tonight, let's just get a room near campus and return in the morning." This didn't seem to bother Oscar much. If anything, he sounded almost cheerful about the plan. From the hallway upstairs, I watched the whole thing unfold, struggling not to burst out laughing. Sienna was such a fool that it was only a matter of time before she ruined herself completely. That little episode only made Oscar and Sienna grow even closer. Not long after, Oscar rented an apartment off campus and moved in with her. They started living together, which honestly felt like a blessing for me and Jessica. To celebrate, we even treated ourselves to a nice meal. Time flew by, and soon senior year was here. By then, we were juggling our theses while gearing up for job hunting. In my previous life, there'd been a speech contest during my junior year. I never entered, and I had no idea if Sienna would have tried to sabotage me again. Regardless, this time I decided to skip it altogether. Instead, I landed a decent internship, which gave me some valuable work experience. One day, Gary sent a message to the class group chat. He stated that a campus job fair would be held the following week, and anyone planning to look for work should be prepared. So I headed to a print shop to print a stack of resumes to bring along. When the day of the job fair arrived, I ran into Sienna for the first time in a while. She was there with Oscar. They were both carrying resumes and clearly job hunting. Since we were in the same major, we naturally had our eyes on the same companies, which meant we'd keep running into each other. On Jessica's end, she hadn't bothered to prepare anything. After all, she was from a wealthy family and wasn't worried about finding a job. She was only there to keep me company and hadn't even brought a resume. "Can you shut up for once? What the hell is wrong with you? I'm trying to land a job here. Do you think this is some kind of joke?" Suddenly, a loud argument broke out in the crowd, and people started gathering around the source of the noise. Jessica and I hurried over too, and saw that it was Sienna and Oscar who were arguing. "You're lying on your resume, and I just pointed it out." "How is that wrong?" Sienna snapped. After asking around for a bit, we finally pieced together what had happened. Apparently, Oscar had confidently come in with his polished resume, hoping he and Sienna could get hired by the same company. They soon locked onto one booth, and Oscar handed his resume to the HR representative. The HR representative glanced through it, clearly intrigued, and started asking him questions. Things were going well until she asked, "What large events did you organize when you were a student council chair?" Before Oscar could answer, Sienna snorted with laughter. She patted his shoulder and blurted out, "Student council chair? You were never even in the student council." She couldn't have exposed him more directly. The HR representative's expression darkened immediately. Upon realizing that the resume was fake, she dismissed him with a curt, "We'll be in touch." Anyone who was job hunting would know that was just a polite way to tell a candidate not to bother waiting. Usually, Oscar would brush off Sienna's clueless remarks as endearing, but this time it hit him where it hurt, his future. He shouted, "Are you out of your mind? Why would you butt in during my interview? You just had to embarrass me, didn't you?" Sienna's eyes welled up, and onlookers rushed to defend her, scolding Oscar for yelling at his girlfriend. Knowing he had no chance with that company now, Oscar raked his hands through his hair in frustration and stormed off without Sienna. Soon the crowd dispersed, and Sienna spotted me and Jessica lingering nearby. She waved us over and whined, "Melissa, can you believe Oscar? He actually yelled at me." I forced a laugh. "Right now, our thesis should be the priority. We can worry about jobs later." She eagerly nodded. "Exactly. He's actually arguing with me over some stupid job. What a jerk." Jessica tugged at my arm, clearly unwilling to get dragged into Sienna's drama, and pulled me away. After walking around the job fair and handing in a few resumes, we then grabbed food at the cafeteria. Just like I'd said, our thesis mattered far more than job hunting. The defense was coming up fast, too. On my thesis defense day, I dressed formally to leave a good impression and couldn't help but feel nervous. Since my student ID was near the end of the list, my defense was scheduled after most of the others. Coincidentally, Sienna and Oscar were both slotted right before me. When Oscar stepped up for his defense, the exact same scene from my past life played out. Sienna suddenly jumped to her feet and accused, "Oscar, how is your thesis identical to mine? Did you plagiarize me?" A wave of relief washed over me. Thank goodness she hadn't targeted me this time. She had found a new victim. Oscar froze. "When did I ever plagiarize your work? You'd better have proof before you start throwing accusations." I expected Sienna to spout her nonsense about dreams like before, but instead she actually pulled out her paper. "See for yourself. Isn't it the same as mine?" Gloria glanced through both theses and immediately noticed that the topics, surveys, and analyses were almost identical. Oscar was stunned. He had poured months into that paper, only to end up with something eerily similar to Sienna's. No explanation would make him look innocent now. "Ms. Bolton, I swear I didn't plagiarize. I don't know why our work turned out the same. I have proof. These are my notes from when I was writing. I discussed my ideas with my advisor regularly. He can vouch for me." As he reached for his phone to show the records, Sienna cut him off and said, "Chat logs can be faked. You must have hacked my laptop and copied my paper." Oscar snapped, "Who the hell would look at your paper? I'm the one who helped you find sources in the first place. You didn't even know what Google Scholar was until I told you." The two of them started shouting at each other in front of everyone. But this was a formal defense. No one was going to let them derail the whole process. Whether or not one copied the other didn't matter. The fact was, at least one of them was guilty. With that, the faculty panel immediately disqualified them both and postponed their graduation. Meanwhile, the rest of us were told to continue. Out in the hallway afterward, a breeze cooled the air, but Oscar was still seething. "Our papers covered the same subject, but there's no way they would be identical. You copied me." Sienna shrugged like it was nothing. "So what? I couldn't finish mine, so I borrowed a little from yours. We're in the same major anyway. What's the big deal?" Oscar couldn't believe what he was hearing. Homework was one thing, but this was their thesis. If they got caught plagiarizing, it could cost him his diploma. "Are you out of your mind? This is our graduation thesis. What if I can't graduate because of this?" Sienna glared back. "All you care about is graduating and finding a job. Am I really less important than that?" Their argument spiraled into nonsense, each talking past the other. Oscar's face flushed red with rage, and his breathing was ragged. "I let your tantrum slide before, but this is my thesis defense. Now my graduation is on hold. You're going to march over there and tell them it was your fault right now." He grabbed Sienna's arm to drag her back. Sienna thrashed against him. "No way! Ms. Bolton was exaggerating. They won't actually stop us from graduating. Let me go." "Are you delusional? Did you not hear what she said? There won't even be a second defense." The more he thought about it, the angrier he got. In the end, he lost control and slapped her across the face. The sound of the slap echoed through the hallway. Sienna froze for 2 seconds, then screamed, "How dare you hit me!" She lunged at Oscar, clawing and kicking. They scuffled wildly, stumbling toward the staircase. Half blinded from her scratching, Oscar stumbled backward. Then his foot slipped, and in a desperate grab for balance, he pulled Sienna down with him. Just like that, they both tumbled down the stairs and lay motionless. A passerby spotted them and immediately called 911. At the hospital, the news was grim. Sienna had injured her spine and lost all feeling in her lower body. Meanwhile, Oscar was in relatively better shape, with just a fractured leg and a few minor scrapes. Sienna was left paralyzed, and her treatment required a huge amount of money. Her parents blamed Oscar entirely and demanded that he pay for her treatment. In truth, none of this would have happened if Sienna hadn't plagiarized his thesis, but that didn't matter now. Her parents refused to listen and insisted that Oscar was responsible. Harassed beyond endurance, Oscar eventually dropped out of college and no one knew where he went. As for me, my defense went smoothly, and the company I had been hoping to enter sent me an offer. After graduation, I moved into a shared apartment with a few strangers. Luckily, they turned out to be perfectly normal people. If they didn't know something, they just looked it up online instead of bothering everyone else. For the first time in a long while, the dark clouds hanging over me finally lifted,